Hey everyone, you are listening to the 805 Uncensored. We are a show on the Anti-Capitalist Podcast Network, hosted by three leftists, though myself and Cami are the only ones here tonight. I think Heather will catch on a little bit later. This podcast covers a variety of topics from music to politics, news, philosophy, and more. There are no limits, which is why we call ourselves Uncensored. So welcome and please follow us on your podcast and social media platforms of choice. This is episode number 98, and today on the show we've got MarxistaTumbado, and we're going to be talking all about patriotic socialism and MAGA communism. So thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. So
Passionate topic of mine.
why don't we just dive right into this? So first of all, what do you both think about patriotic socialism and this whole fringe like MAGA communism movement?
I'll
Whoever
let
wants to
Cami go
start.
first.
Oh no, you put me in the spot. I'm usually not the one to go first, but okay. Um, well, I think maybe it started out, I don't know, I get bad vibes from it. I think from what we've seen, a lot of the people involved are either homophobic, they're anti-land back, they they want to hold on to like Western values, like meaning like a man, a wife, and children, and um, it's like
Like the nuclear family trad wife shit.
yeah, yeah, it's like fascism and like dressed in red drag, you know. And unfortunately, I've been close to people close in the movement without knowing, and then they kind of like came out that they were really like going for this whole thing. And yeah, anyway, I even took a class with Midwestern Marx like Academy on a book, and it was, I mean, I have the book here. Oh. And so with Danny Shaw, Professor Danny Shaw, we read this book, the All Shaw's Men, and the class was good. And like, I don't have anything negative to say about that, but like whenever they got in bed with Jackson Hinkle, I think it just got so much worse, and that's when I was like, yo, I'm gonna like step all the way back and like, yeah, no, this is just not right. So, yeah.
Yeah, what do you think, Marxista?
Well, I think I kind of have the same thoughts as Cami because at first I thought it was like something ironic. I thought it was like a one-off joke or of like, oh yeah, it's Trump in front of a hammer and sickle, and that's it. That's just a little meme that they have. But then I started seeing like people actually defending and postulating like very much Marxist takes of the 70s and 60s that I didn't even know existed. But then as I went like further into like the rabbit hole of this whole right Marxism, I realized that it's just another iteration of something that's been going on for like fucking 50 years in the US. These white guys who stumble upon Marx and they take out all like their frustration with well, just incel behavior pretty much and try to convince themselves that it's all because of capitalism. And it is. I mean, we can talk about alienation and all of those conditions, but Marxism is not a way to like, or communism is not like the answer to be like, oh yeah, and this is how you're going to go back to that traditional life. I think it's this very weird thing where a lot of gullible people got in at the moment that it was. I think it's very opportunistic. That's the word I'm looking for. I think I realized that a lot of the people, like the main figureheads, are very smart in the way that they managed to get a lot of young people who were completely thrown to the side by the U.S. government, by the establishment, and giving them this other side of, oh, you don't have to be a Republican or or a Democrat. You can be a MAGA communist, which is we can talk about later on like what it actually means to be a MAGA communist. But yeah, I think it's very uh telling of our time right now, of our, not to get all joker, but like our society, how we've been alienated and how it's not as fringe of a movement as you think, because I have prepared something in other movement that have been similar, but I think it's actually kind of scary how many people are falling into this MAGA communist pipeline.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and it's particularly insidious, right, to take advantage of the deteriorating material conditions that people are experiencing to kind of just brainwash them into adopting these like communist red aesthetics and then turning them into adopting like straight up fascist takes. So it's quite alarming and it's quite scary, but at the same time, it's not surprising to see people that are trying to capitalize on this, like literally and figuratively, right? Like there are people like Jackson Hinkle, like Caleb Maupin, that are actually profiting off of this.
Yeah, like the same school, the academy that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
it's funny.
definitely.
I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of this podcast called Revolutionary Left Radio.
Yeah.
Mm,
So I was a while back. I was listening to one of their episodes, and this was way after Midwestern Marx came out as a infrared communist or a MAGA communist, and like there was like a period of time where they actually collaborated with Midwestern Marx Academy, and it was so surreal to hear, like knowing that a couple of years later it was going to just degrade into this fascist little psyop of a movement. And I think it's just weird how, because honestly, I used to follow Midwestern Marx. He used to be like actually a very good resource for new lefties on TikTok. But now
Mhm.
it's dangerous. I think now his content is more dangerous because he's turning all these baby leftists into baby brown shirts and red shirts.
yeah.
Yeah. Go
Oh,
ahead, Kimmy.
no, I was just gonna say, there were there were a lot more. They have turned, right? They whenever they got together with Jackson Hinkle, like, and they dropped everyone else. Like I also know like they've had beef with like countless like accounts. Like my good friend, my friend podcast was Left of the South. They were, like they had beef with them, and I feel like with everybody that we may be familiar with, like they were cool at one point, and then they kind of turned fascist. And it's sad to see because at least Danny Shaw, like I know him personally, and like it sucks that he is deep in with them because he's not like a bad person, you know what I mean? And he's very smart and very knowledgeable, but he really roots for them. So
Yeah, it is really unfortunate to see. Um, Marxista, do you have anything else you want to say before I dive into kind of just formal definitions?
Just I think I can leave my point for later on.
Okay, so this is from the Proletarian Wikipedia, which I think is a pretty good source on leftist information. Patriotic Socialism, abbreviated PATSOC, is an opportunist and revisionist movement. It was born in the U.S. that advocates for patriotism within the imperial core. It's distinct from patriotism within anti-imperialist colonized and socialist countries, which I'll kind of get more into this later on. And we were kind of hinting at it. It's like it's communism without decolonization, which really fucking at the end of the day means nothing. If you're talking about, lifting up the material conditions of the working class, but you're not talking about indigenous people, you're not talking about black, brown people, like literally what you're saying means nothing. So, patriotic socialism has grown to become its own strand of socialist theory, especially within the communist movement in the US. However, this trend is wholly different from patriotism as applied to socialism, in the sense of like Mao's China. The name Patriotic Socialism was originally coined by its followers, thus marking a clear difference with socialist patriotism, or other similar terms, but they started moving away from it when it became too adversarial to use it. The people who are commonly associated as current leaders of patriotic socialism include Hawes, Caleb Maupin, and Jackson Hinkle. So I actually have a video that I wanted to show. Cami, we kind of went over it before we started recording, but I'd like to show you, Marxista, Jackson Hinkle talking about MAGA communism on OAN. And for the listeners out there that don't know what OAN is, that's One American News Network, which is actually to the right of Fox News. I'll repeat that. They're to the right of Fox News. So it's really saying something. So yeah, just give me 1 sec and I'll put this video on. This is going to be super good.
Are not necessarily a problem, but this is so convoluted. It's amazing, but it's also funny.
Today, communists have a lot of the same goals as working class Americans made up in the MAGA movement. We want more prosperity for average Americans. We want to end big tech. We want to end big agriculture, big pharma. We want to stop the monopolies and the subsidization of monopolies all across America. And we want to reinstill patriotic education in this country. We don't want open borders. We don't want, a green fascist push amongst our people. These aren't things that we support.
Can someone tell me what a green fascist push is?
The Green New Deal, I think.
Yeah.
Is talking about.
Mm.
I mean, no, it doesn't like a communist.
Yes, and so is Elizabeth Warren, I guess, right?
Reinstill patriotic education in this country. We don't want open borders. We don't want, a green fascist push amongst our people. These aren't things that we support because we are average Americans as well. And the synthetic leftists today, the Democratic Party and the so-called progressives, they're far close, though they might call themselves socialists, they're far closer aligned with, the quote unquote national socialists in Nazi Germany than any sort of, socialism.
Pause
that
for a
we
second.
see.
Wait, what is it?
Yeah, so, I mean, that says it all, right? Everything that he just said.
You accuse somebody else of being like the Nazis?
Yeah.
That's like a projection, don't you think? Like,
Absolutely.
I think everything that he's saying, it's okay.
He seems like and not seems like, is the type of person, that would use National Socialism, Nazism, to talk about socialism, because that's effectively what he's doing. When I think about patriotic socialism, when I think about, can you guys hear me?
No, you cut out for a few.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he seems like the type of guy when he's talking about National Socialism to actually believe that, like, because he's a fucking Nazi. He's adopting socialist and communist aesthetics, but being a right-wing fascist.
Right.
Have you guys researched where he comes from, like the background of Jackson Hinkle?
Yeah, he's from San Clemente, California. He's from Orange County.
Yeah, he's our neighbor. But so I researched him a bit, and I think it's pretty clear from the get-go that he's just a grifter, but he's a very good grifter at that. It's hard for me to comprehend how somebody can listen to him and actually believe that he believes what he's saying. It's honestly baffling to me that he has a following. I mean, there's obviously, if Trump has a following, then anyone can have a following. But it's honestly, I don't think we're there yet. But I think he's developing this cultish thing around him. I think it's close to happening.
Yeah, I would agree.
So, can you tell me more about his background or what you found out about him?
Well, honestly, I I just saw a YouTube video. I didn't do like a whole deep dive. I
Yeah.
just know that he was like in high school. He did like some political work. Like it's funny that he says this, oh, green fascism. I assume he's talking about like, well, environment, looking after the fucking planet that we're destroying.
Hmm.
But he actually used to be in high school. Like his whole thing in high school was cleaning up beaches, and he actually was named, I think, like top most influential teens or something by Forbes. So he was actually like a, kind of like a big deal when he was in high school. He peaked there, you could say, and then he actually went up for a position in a city. I don't know if it was city council, but it was completely like,
He was on the San Clemente City Council.
yeah. And then after that, he realized, my assumption is that he realized that he wasn't getting any money with that. So he began like this whole Andrew Tate persona, like actually like literally Andrew Tate, like having cigars and being on like penthouses, and that didn't help him as much. Like that made him grow, but not as much as when he started to get political. When he started endorsing Russia, when he started endorsing China, he got invited to Chinese television, and that's when he really started growing a following. And I think that's when he realized, like, oh, there's like this whole uh, community of left streamers like Haas and Midwestern Marks that I can like hang out with, and they can be like my little minions.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy to me is this guy's fucking 25 years old. Like, I have to keep on reminding myself about this. Like, he's 25.
I was in shock when I heard that. I was like, he was born in '99. What the fuck?
That's
He,
so young.
yeah, he has the mentality of like a boomer. I legit thought he was like a boomer. I thought he was like, I don't know, 45 at
Well,
least
right,
because of
I
the
know.
way he
Like,
says shit.
until I learned more about him, I thought he was at least 30.
Yeah, but he's young. But I think that can show in the way that he knows how to use social media. He truly uses social media in a way that he knows that Gen Z will react to it and that Gen Z will consume it and be like, oh, this guy is saying some smart shit when it's not.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the pseudo intellectualism of like the mid 2010s with like Ben Shapiro, right? When he would debate these college freshmen and he would like quote unquote own them. And it's like, dude, you're just talking to people that have maybe taken a few introductory classes on politics or international affairs or economics or whatever the fuck we're talking about. And you're parading this image that you're some dominant intellectual.
I find it
Exactly.
funny that you mentioned that whole like era of content of like, oh, Ben Shapiro destroys a hall of feminists and that whole bullshit. Because I think we're kind of seeing the rebirth of that, but obviously like conditions have changed, and now we have like the whole Jubilee thing of, oh, 10 college teens debate Ben Shapiro, and there's like some actually like well-educated college kids that can hold their own against Ben Shapiro. But then you go and look up like all of these college kids that debate Ben Shapiro have their TikToks, and then you go on their TikToks and they're like die-hard liberals, like Kamala Harris till I die kind of liberal. And it's like, oh, it's just the same. It's you we. We've been giving the spectacle of, oh, he's finally getting a comeback, like Shapiro is finally getting his comeuppance, but it's by another Ben Shapiro, just a blue Ben Shapiro, a liberal Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like fascists arguing with each other, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They live in this binary that, if you're team blue, that you're somehow ideologically opposed to conservatism, but you're not. You're just a flip of the same coin.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Has Jackson Hinkle ever had like a conversation with Ben Shapiro? Has that ever happened?
I don't know, honestly.
I don't know either. Wouldn't
I
surprise
wouldn't know
me.
either.
Um,
The shit with Destiny and Nick Fuentes is really funny though.
did you guys see
We
the
don't talk
videos
about
or
that.
no?
No.
You did?
I did. I saw like a censor one on TikTok. It was like somebody just posted the thing. I don't think. I mean, what I've heard, I think it wasn't even Nick Fuentes. I think it's just like the rumor. Uh, my take on that is, I mean, just let the man be who he wants to be. It's just, if it is Nick Fuentes, I think we have like this, like very on the nose metaphor of like liberals and fascists. That's all I'm gonna say.
Blowing each other in the back of a Kia.
Exactly.
I'll say the rest.
Aren't there videos too from like 2 years ago of them actually recording shit together?
Like a show.
Yeah, like content where they were, I don't know, like talking to people on the street and shit.
Really, I don't doubt it. I mean,
So I'm pretty
Destiny,
sure,
he has no self dignity.
yeah, I'm pretty sure I came across some videos on YouTube where it was like Destiny and Nick Fuentes hanging out.
I honestly, for me, Nick Fuentes came out of the bloom. I was still like getting used to seeing like team pool tweets on my ex, and then all of a sudden now I have Nick. Is Nick Fuentes the one that like gave himself a face tune on a picture and everybody noticed? Does anybody remember that?
He's
I
the
don't think that was him.
your
No.
body, my choice guy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
think because like a year ago, I think it was Nick Fuentes. He was promoting like an event, like a talk that he was given, and he gave himself like a very square jaw. Like he pretty much just edited his face, and people like realized like, dude, that's not you. We know what you look like. You're full of shit.
he made himself look like a Chad.
Yeah, like literally. Yeah, actually, that was the meme that he made himself into a Chad because he was like this MAGA masculine guy, but I mean, he
The
kind of
most
isn't.
disturbing thing I've seen about Nick Fuentes is saying how basically he wants to marry a teenager, somebody, and like I forget the words of that video exactly, but yeah, basically him saying that he would never marry someone his own age, that he would marry a child because by the time he was like older, she needed to still be young for him. So, yeah, it's one of the most disturbing things I've seen online. And to think that people like follow this dude is just like, what the fuck? Yeah, he
Yeah,
is
it
something
doesn't
else.
surprise me.
And then, um, what about like Jackson Hinkle's having like anti-Semitic, like takes? Like I've seen that too, it's not, like he makes, and I've seen like pro-Palestine people share his content, and I'm like, no, like just because he has a right take every once in a while doesn't mean like, this guy is all right. But I think a lot of like the people that kind of tend to go the anti-Semitic way whenever they are criticizing Israel actually are doing a disservice to the movement because you don't want to make them the victim. You know what I mean? You don't want to make them like they're the oppressed. And so I think they do it solely because they are truly anti-Semitic and not because they care about Palestine and because of, the club.
I agree. I think fucking Jackson Hinkle is a white supremacist.
Yeah. Actually, that was the point I was going to make earlier. I think that right now, in the information era that we have, their content is twice as much dangerous because you have so many people who are, like Cami said, they're sharing these anti-Semitic takes by Jackson Hinkle, which are actually anti-Semitic. It isn't this stupid thing of being anti-Zionist is being anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
it's actually being anti-Semitic. But people from our movement, or people who are entering the movement, who see any shining thing and think it's right, will share it and then give weapons, or at least ideological weapons, to the other side to be like, oh, look, they are actually anti-Semitic. We know we're
Right.
not, of course. We know that we're not against the Jewish people. We're just against the illegal occupation. But those kinds of content being so viral and having so many people sharing them, so many people who are entering this space, just gives them more, let's say, ammunition when it's time to actually discuss anti-Semitism and be like, oh, well, Jackson Hinkle is a big member of your community, which I believe he's not. I think every single like actual person who believes in Palestine and the liberation of Palestine disowns Jackson Hinkle. But to the media, to like Fox News, to CNN, they're gonna turn to the Twitch streamers who have the most viewers, and that's Jackson Hinkle, that's Haas, that's Midwestern Marx, and I think it's like just so dangerous in the talking about Palestine as well.
No, seriously, that's such a great point, because I mean, if we're talking about the mainstream media, they're seriously, unironically saying voices like Jackson Hinkle are just as meaningful as like Norm Finkelstein. Or like, actual Palestinian scholars that are speaking on the genocide in Gaza. They're saying people like Jackson Hinkle are just as, influential.
And also he's being represented as the left. And that taints us, that taints us all. So.
Right, and
I'm gonna admit something very.
Subsequently,
sorry.
Also associate him with just like the broader, if we support Palestine, we're just all Hamas terrorists.
I'm sorry. Just a little stupid thing. I used to think that Jason Hinkle and Jackson Hinkle were the same person. So whenever I saw somebody like share a Jason Hinkle quote, I was like, why are they sharing this fascist? And then like I realized like they're two different people. They just have like very, very similar names.
Yeah, very different people. One is very good, the other one is very bad. Do not confuse them. And yeah, I remember even like sharing some of Kate Johnston. You guys know who she is, right? Australian writer.
Kate Johnstone.
Yeah. She has, you know who she is. Hold on.
Yeah, talks about imperialism a lot.
Yeah. She has this, you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was sharing some of her stuff, and one of my collaborators was like, no, I think she's related. She's one of those MAGA communists. I don't want to post her. And I'm like, no, she's not. But like how everything like kind of like gets murky whenever people are, they have like a bad rep, and then it affects other people even if they're not even closely related. So that sucks.
It's just guilty by association.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you guys remember that I sent in the group chat a little bingo card?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so since I knew that this was going to be a Pat Soch podcast, a while back I heard about this figure called Lyndon LaRouche. And he's basically like, I wouldn't say the prototypical MAGA communist. So I gave you that little bingo card so you can check off how many similarities LaRouche has with Jackson Hinkle, Haas, and Midwestern Marx, and like in general, everyone, like the belief system. Because I actually have been noticing and do believe that a lot of these MAGA communists are actually pulling a lot of inspiration from LaRouchian thought. So
it's not conspiratorial. They are.
Yeah, I mean, I actually tried to look up if any of them have mentioned him. I haven't found anything yet, but if they do, it's gonna be just the icing on the cake. It's gonna be further confirmation.
Right.
So okay, so Lyndon LaRouche, he was born on September 8th, 1922. So he was a Virgo, and And at first, so he came on prominence during the new era, the new left era. Basically, real quick, like his background is fucking crazy. I shit you not. I read like 4 articles. I listened to a whole podcast series, and there's still like so many like batshit crazy things about this guy. But essentially, he became kind of like a weird communist kind of guy during World War II. His father was this very right wing Quaker. So in World War II, he began associating with a lot of communists, and he was actually stationed in India. And as like a good white leftist, he decided, oh, I'm going to tell the Indian people to rise against the colonial rule because that's what they have to do. And he went, supposedly, this is allegedly, he went to the head of the Indian Marxist or Communist Party and told them, hey, you should rebel against the colonial rule. And they were like, no, we cannot do that. We're not in the material conditions to have a popular revolution. And then he became like a bit disenchanted with Marxist-Leninism, so he became a Trotskyist. And he came back to the U.S. and joined a Trotskyist organization. And at that time, they were sending like their members to factories to I don't know, just like recruit people. Mm-hmm. But he didn't want to go to a factory because he was a little pampered. So he actually got a job as like a managerial guy. Mm-hmm. And this is when it all went batshit crazy because he joined this. I have it right here. It was the SWP, which I think it's the Social Workers League. Everywhere I've researched this organization, they say that it was like fucking batshit. It was like a cult. So Lyndon LaRouche took a lot of like this culty things and then began his own org that was called the Socialist. I have it right here. Excuse me. It was the National Caucus for Labor Committee. So a mouthful. And it was during this time that he proclaimed himself as like the actual. Let's just imagine that this is Jackson Hinkle saying he was like the real left. He was against everything. His communism was like the good communism. All of his members had to be clean cut. They had to wear suits. They had this vision of like the patriarchal stereotype of a man. There was this teacher strike that was going on at the time, and they backed up the strike, which, I mean, as leftists, you're like, oh yeah, teacher strike, we should back that up. Except when you find out that this teacher strike was actually trying to limit the accessibility of POC education for children. So they wanted patriotic education, just like Jackson Hinkle. And these guys were like, oh yeah, we are totally for that. We don't want any of this racial identity politics in our schools. And after that, they just went batshit. So they began this whole conspiracy of the Jewish people and English people were involved in like this secret society. So they caused World War II. They caused World War I. They're the ones behind everything. And that would be okay. It would be okay if it was just a fringe movement. But if you look it up, it was actually quite a big movement in the 70s and 80s, to the point where there was this, I think it was in New York, this guy who was going to run for mayor as a Marxist. And his organization began beating up every communist that was supporting him. So that caused an alliance between the Trotskyist parties and the Marxist parties. Like the only time that the Trotskyists and the Marxists actually had an alliance in New York was because of this dumb fuck who was beating up communists and was beating up Trotskyists. And then he became really good friends with Ronald Reagan. And that's when I think a lot of this MAGA or like conservative communism began to take form, because he had like actual CIA members in his party. There was a guy who was, I think it was the head of security for fucking Batista, the guy, the dictator from Cuba, within his group, training his own group. So there were a lot of FBI members. For example, they really you know how people always criticize like MAGA communists, say, "Oh, we hate the FBI," and they hate them because they raided Trump's house. It was like similar with them, like, "Oh, we hate the FBI, but because they're not killing enough black people." That was
Mhm.
another thing. They they hid a lot of their racism behind their black members because they would go into impoverished areas and like see vulnerable men and be like, "Hey, we can help you. We have the solution." Like very cultishly. And funnily enough, not a lot of black members remained within that organization. A lot of them left, but they hid behind, "Oh, we're not racist. We have two black members." Uh,
The
Also,
token.
there's a
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And there's tons of like sexual abuse accusations against their organization. The guy eventually went into Chinese television and said that he was the proponent of Marxism in the US. I mean, just completely batshit crazy stuff. But as I was researching this, I was like, this is Jackson Hinkle, Midwestern Marx, Haas. These guys, like 40 years ago, we haven't learned shit. Like, it's not a new phenomenon. It's a charismatic leader. It's taking a generation of people who are lost, who are confused, and giving them this little thing of, oh, it's all identity politics. It's all the fault of women. It's all the fault of the LGBTQ, of other minorities, and then just giving them this. It's not even Marxism at this point. It's just fascism. He actually had this very. I saw a lot of people comparing him to Mussolini, so it was that kind of breed of fascist. And I think if we're not careful, we're gonna start seeing more and more like ACP members or MAGA communists actually starting to do like violent demonstrations, like Lyndon Rouge did in the 70s and 80s.
I think if they were to do that, they would use like their lower ranking members to get that, accomplished. So hopefully that's not the case.
Yeah, and you mentioned Cuba. I was actually going to talk about Cuba. So back in 2022, there were several patriotic socialists that were super vocal about the Cuban constitutional referendum. This abolished the monopoly of the nuclear family and recognized like other forms of the family. They decried it as degeneracy and considered Cuba to no longer be socialist after that. So, like, just think about that.
It's Have these people ever read Marx? Like, I genuinely want to know what they read, what their bookshelf looks like, because when I began as a Marxist, maybe I'm just lucky that I didn't fall into the wrong crowd. But I never heard like these kind of things of like, oh, the nuclear family should be defended under communism or Marxism. I don't know, it's just weird.
Communism is when you 1950s USA.
Exactly. They actually tweeted it. So there is this account that's called Conservative, and they love AI too. And they post like all this fucking really like weird 1950s Nazi like American propaganda. But then like like the ACP turns around and does the same, but they dress them up in red. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a woman's place is in the kitchen, kind of bullshit. Yeah, it's bad. And then I found a picture of him surfing with he's surfing with the lieutenant colonel of the U.S. Army PSYOPs command. So apparently there's like, wait, so that's him surfing with the PSYOPs colonel of the U.S. Army. So I don't know. I just look at this guy, and there is just nothing special about him. So it's very weird how he's got so big. I feel like he needs he got some help from somewhere. And then, do you know how they went to Venezuela after the elections?
Yeah.
That was okay. Like, isn't that a little bit sus? Like, I don't know. I just feel like everything about them is so weird.
They're just fucking grifters, as Marxista said earlier. They're just people that just, like, they're really, really insidious bad actors. They're taking advantage of people that are at their lowest point, that are just trying to get through capitalism. You know, whether it's supporting themselves or their families or trying to just look at some sort of other alternative form of life. And they're having a mental breakdown, really, at the end of the day. And these people are fucking taking advantage of them.
But I also think they might be like fat backed, like on top of that, you know.
Like, no, like, seriously. I mean, why wouldn't, like, the CIA back somebody like Jackson Hinkle?
Yeah. So
He's a perfect state asset.
What do you think would be like? Let's put our little tinfoil hats on. What would be the end plan of that psyop? Just, I mean, obviously, maybe turn people away from like real leftist movements. Maybe like people who could lead. Let's go fucking full on. Could lead a revolution.
Okay,
and
let's just talk about one thing at a time. So, like, I think he serves a purposeful. He serves a purpose just for the whole Israel and Palestine issue, right? Because he sows division. He fucking muddies the waters. He makes it really hard to understand what's really going on, and he's popular. So I feel like that plays into the hands of the state.
yeah, I see that. I can see that totally.
yeah, I think it's just to further taint the left. Like the US has a war on communism and since, you know, ever. So I think it's just to further taint the left, to further divide whatever left there is. And to just like confuse people, you know?
Yeah,
But
yeah, because why else would there be an emphasis on associating MAGA with communism?
yeah, and the weird thing is like we don't really hear about QAnon anymore, but this we hear about this a lot more. So it's like you
True.
went from one super random thing to like the next, and
I assure you, there's like a lot of people who went from that QAnon pipeline to the MAGA communist pipeline because the conspiracy theories are basically the same. Like, oh, the Jewish cabal that wants to kidnap children and turn them trans. That's
yeah,
the whole their whole little conspiracy that the MAGA communists love to always pull out.
yeah, yeah. It's almost like the same, but just with the communist aspects of it.
Yeah, what is it? Just like different variations of the 14 words?
Yeah, basically.
I mean, I think we can all so far like the ACP and all these like fringe movement have proven that they're losers. They're like this incel guy who just wants to go back to a trad life. But I think we've realized how like fucking dangerous a white guy can be when he's so programmed. And a while back, I remember this like ACP ad came out, and it was them like flexing some kind of like military thing. I think it was obviously edited. It looked like a Halo clip. It looked like they just went on like a stock footage and looked for oh, tough guys. But it was the fact that they were postulating that, oh, we could become this like paramilitary organization that I think could be like very actually physical danger to other leftists and the people that they so often criticize like or hate, like the LGBTQ, other minorities. And I'm just being catastrophic, but there is potential for like another brown shirts, like Italy's brown shirts, but right here with the ACP, this paramilitary who will beat up other protesters, or like I said with LaRouche, who will go to leftist rallies and beat up other leftists and just go away easy because, well, the state obviously loves that. The state loves seeing leftists being fucking massacred, and they won't do a shit.
Yeah, I mean, so like just going on off, going off of that point, going back to Cuba, like I was just gonna talk about how in 2021, we had all these MAGA communists, these patriotic socialists that were literally backing the cops, that were cracking down on these protesters that were in the streets of Havana because of food shortages, because of they didn't have medical supplies during the pandemic, and then we had these quote unquote leftists that were literally saying, yeah, hit them harder, just like a fucking fascist would during, like the George Floyd protests or anybody marching towards liberation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the whole mistake of this, and it's not like we mentioned earlier, it's very much a fault of like this, like the media, the big media, is that they call them leftist. They call themselves leftist, and the media lets them call left. Like when I was researching Jackson Hinkle, I saw YouTube. Every single like thumbnail or title was, "Oh, leftist Jackson Hinkle," or the left's new personality, Jackson Hinkle. I was like, why? Like, why are they referring to them as left? What is left about them?
Because he uses the word communism, so in their mind, he's a leftist.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he says. It doesn't matter what his policies are. It doesn't matter how the fuck he views the world or what his ethics are. He uses the word communism and socialism, so he's a leftist.
Yeah, I think also because he mentions from time to time American imperialism. Those two buzzwords for like the media is like, oh, he's a leftist. He mentioned the big thing, the American imperialist, but you can mention it all you want, but his whole traditional lifestyle is based upon imperialism. The only reason why they would live such cushy life as they do on their AR arts would be because of American imperialism, exploiting other countries.
Yeah, at the end of the day, these are fucking white people that are just basically admitting, hey, as long as we have labor rights, as long as we have some sort of,
stability,
as long as we have some sort of stability in society, and as long as workers can get by, I'm perfectly fine with no land back. I'm perfectly fine with oppressing indigenous people. No fucking problem. And it's just like, how convenient for you.
Yeah, they're perfectly okay with fucking up their global south as long as they're cool.
I think it's funnier when these like AI accounts make their AR art of like Native Americans with them. It's like, oh, it's an ACP worker and a Native American, and they're like holding hands and they're holding a rifle. But then you listen to the shit that they say, they don't want it. It's just like the optics of it looks cool on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, the account that we mentioned the other time that very often posts and collaborates with a lot of my Mexican meme friends, and of like, oh, a Mexican guy and an American guy, and they're both like MAGA communists. It's like, do you not realize that that's completely contradictory to what you're saying? You're preaching like unity on your optics, but your whole discourse is based on hatred and just pure division.
Yeah, for sure. I just saw a stupid post of Jackson Hinkle where it's an AI image, and it's like the background is like Western looking cowboys kind of type of thing, and then also like in front of them is like the Palestinian fighters, and like equating them to each other. And it's like, bro, you would be the Israelis in this situation. Stop. Full stop. You know what I mean?
Weren't there tweets of like Jackson Hinkle like a couple of years back backing Israel? I'm pretty sure I saw that on X like last week. Somebody dug up I think like 2 years ago, Jackson Hegel was all for Israel, but now that like the movement for Palestine has become so popular, thank God, he's as a good grifter, he's like, oh no, now I'm all for Palestine.
Right.
Yeah, and it seems like that's also, besides being an argument for him being a grifter, I think that's also an argument in favor of him being a state asset.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what the fuck?
Like the founding fathers, and then
Can you just describe to our listeners again what we're looking at, Cami?
it's a Palestine flag, and then it's an AI image, and then a Palestine flag as the background, and then the founding fathers. I think that's supposed to be like George Washington, and then on the in front of the Palestinian flags, and then in front of them is the Palestinian freedom fighters. So that's what Jackson Hinkle thinks. Like basically, we can just show this to people and be like, okay, yeah, this guy's fucked, and he doesn't know shit about fuck.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and with
Why
a
do
big
so many
American flag and all that.
why do so many losers love AI? Like it's cool. Like I've seen some cool stuff, but like I see Jackson Hickel, I see the MAGA, I see Elon Musk. Like maybe we should talk about AI later. But yeah, just a little side point. I think if your movement, your whole propaganda movement is based on AI art, I think that's pretty telling.
Yeah, and then oh my God, his profile picture is so look, it's an AI picture of him, of everybody pointing their guns at him. It reminds me of that white lady that put a target on her own forehead. Remember a sticker and was like, "Oh, everybody hates me." You know what I mean? It's so petty, bro. So embarrassing.
I think that little picture like is the perfect representation of how Jackson Hickel, when you like boil him down, he's just like he just likes to, what's the word I'm looking for? He likes to bait. He wants to like he's hate baiting because that's what his whole grift as like an alpha male began as, just like trying
Rage.
to rage bait. Exactly, yeah. He's trying to rage bait. I think that's the whole thing. And right now he's rage baiting using causes. I mean, I think that connects to what you said, Jordan, of like him being a state asset. He's rage baiting Palestine. He's rage baiting a lot of like actual movements that need help, but bringing people like liberals, because liberals hate Jackson Hickel, and if liberals see that Jackson Hickel supports Palestine, well, liberals don't need excuses to hate Palestine, but they will take that as a way to be like, oh no, but those are the kind of people who support Palestine.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Do you guys want to talk about Caleb Maupin and kind of the accusations against him, or do you want to wrap up the episode? Because I'm good either way. We've got like 48 minutes of really good material.
I don't know who that is.
So
Me
Caleb
neither. I would like to.
he's one of the founders of MAGA Communism, and one of the like the forefront leaders of Patriotic Socialism. Okay, yeah. So I'll read about this then. So LaRoucheite, Patriotic Socialist. He's a cult founder from the USA who came to national and even international prominence in August of 2022 after accusations of abuse, sexual, and manipulative were brought forward by former members of his think tank, which is called the Center for Political Innovation. He founded the CPI, a for-profit business that he calls a think tank. This made him the sole owner of the CPI, allowed him to make a profit, so it's kind of like a workaround, which wouldn't be possible in an organization legally registered as a political party. It also made all members legally employees and not members of a party. So basically, after the accusations came out, the CPI decided on its own dissolution. Their Twitter account was deactivated and their website didn't load anymore. Maupin himself deactivated his account and moved away from the public eye. And then, as far as the accusations go, Maupin ran the CPI from a hotel room in New York that ended up costing $600 a week, where he forced the new and younger members to live and volunteer most of their time towards fundraising and canvassing for new members. Members were supposed to provide for themselves during that time and pay for the hotel room themselves, while Maupin was living in his own home and had his own job. In one instance, which I find these very telling, he told his wife over text that he would set up a big compound in the woods where he would live with all the kids, the CPI members. So, can you guys see this on the right here, this text exchange? So she says, that's not how adult acts. That's why I'm moving up in the world and you aren't. Or he says, that's not how adults act. That's why I'm moving up in the world and you aren't. You don't know, have social skills. You are the one. I'm asserting myself like an adult and I might get my bonus. And she says, dream. Eventually I'm going to make enough money with CPI that I will quit RT and then I will leave you also. I'm going to set up a big compound in the woods where I will live with all the kids and I studio to broadcast my show over the internet. And then she's like, you're crazy.
Fucking Peter Pan syndrome.
Yeah. So sexual misconduct. He has a well-known spanking fetish, apparently. Something that he brings into seemingly every conversation he has with people for his own sexual gratification. In the call-out piece published on Medium, several of his former comrades speak about his spanking fetish and how he'd work it even in texts to CPI members. In 2020, he defended... Huh?
How do you work it in text? How do you work a spank fetish on text?
Oh, you just be like, oh yeah, you've been a bad boy. I'm gonna spank you.
And then you just send like the hand emoji.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Bro, cakes are so weird. Okay, keep going.
So in 2020, he defended spanking to Samira Khan, another noted reactionary and patriotic socialist. That same year, when allegations of abuse in the Party for Socialism and Liberation came to light, Maupin instantly jumped to invoking COINTELPRO to defend the PSL. He ran 2 segments on RT defending spanking and corporal punishment, one in 2016 and another in 2021. In August of 2022, accusations of abuse formally came out in an article published by members and ex-members of the CPI on Medium. In the now deleted but archived piece, they accused Maupin of pushing his spanking fetish on them unprompted and without consent. One of the members, identified only as Member 2, explained how Maupin essentially made her lose her job by requiring she give more and more time to the John Brown volunteers, the precursor of the CPI, which led her to being fired. Afterwards, he used the 19-year-old positions of vulnerability to push her into prostitution. He seemingly achieved this because Member 2 was at the time in a vulnerable situation and had done such work in the past. By admonishing her when she wanted to get a new job outside of the CPI, Maupin eventually left her no choice but to return to prostitution. When Member 2 told Maupin she was picking it up again, his only reaction was that he respects her decision. A much different reaction than he had when Member 2 would try to find other work. Maupin would later try to hire Member 2's services. From there, Member 2 relapsed into heroin, and Maupin used that to isolate her from the rest of the CPI, even lying about her addiction to other members after she got better so that they would not associate with her.
That got dark.
Yeah, and then, so that's all the abuse levied against Caleb Maupin. And then, there's of course the anti-communist activities that comes with all these MAGA communists, these patriotic socialists. Despite Maupin's claims that he's a communist, he has on many occasions heavily criticized communists for their views when they do not align with his strand of patriotic socialism. He's also been very close to many anti-communists and fascists, trying to cleanse their image to his audience. So this is where the Fed connection comes in that you mentioned, Cami. In 2014, Maupin was present at the Second International Conference of Independent Thinkers hosted in Tehran, Iran. He was on a panel that also featured Nazi Maoist, a short-lived movement in Italy, Claudio Muti, as well as other fascists who were funded by the CIA during Operation Gladio. He was present at the Alternatives to Globalization conference in 2018, sitting next to noted fascist Alexander Dugin and speaking alongside him. He defended this decision and spoke highly of Dugin, a mystical metaphysical author, and since that event, notably, it was reported by attendees that the only books sold at CPI events were from Maupin and Dugan. So yeah, I mean, he's just a terrible person that's an obvious grifter.
I remember whenever I close my eyes, I see that picture, and I just laugh when they announced that they were gonna make like an actual party, the ACP. There's this guy on Twitter. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's called the Black Red Guard. Amazing guy.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that one of the guys in that picture used to be with him in a Maoist organization. And the guy's like pretty much the same. He left his kid and wife, and he's like a deadbeat dad. And on ACP, he's like preaching this like, oh, traditional masculinity and take care of your family and nuclear family comes first and all that bullshit. When in real life, he's like this just deadbeat dad.
That checks out. I mean, yeah, that was pretty much everything I had on MAGA communism and patriotic socialism. It's just like this. It seems like this fringe movement, right? That doesn't really matter, but it actually does. It's important to focus on because these people are dangerous.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I was coughing. I had to step out of the room.
No worries. So Marxista, where can people find you online? Do you have any projects that you're working on right now?
So anyone can find me on Instagram at MarxistaTumbado. I would give out my X, but I deleted it because I don't want Elon Musk to know my shit. And that's it. I usually just post like memes on there. Since I'm gonna be moving to the US completely, I make some like videos. I'm probably gonna start making some like also like lefty videos on English. So if the audience wants to follow me, it's gonna come soon. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. That's good. What shirt are you wearing?
Oh, it's just this little cute shirt. I was sweating under my hoodie, so I just had to take it off. Oh, it's like these like cookie, yeah.
Is it
looks
clothing
like my cat.